Okay, welcome to zoology. All right, so Professor Stolberg. Um, this is my studio at home here. I do all my recordings here. For zoology, um, the the hybrid course, lecture online, lab in person. At least half of the lab is in person. We will go over the syllabus and schedule, and I will give you a copy of the syllabus on the first day of lab. Okay. Now, lecture for this course is online. However, all the exams, lecture and lab, are in the lab, in person in the lab. Okay. I'll talk about all that when we go over the syllabus. So this is your first lecture, and typically the lectures will take an hour, and they're done. This one is a little bit longer than an hour. The first one I usually do an hour in lecture, and then I do about half an hour in lab. So I'm gonna have to probably make 2 videos out of this. Anyway, so I'll just dive in here, and we'll start with zoology. This is an interesting lecture. Introduction, evolution, and this and that. Okay, trying to think of something else that is important for you to know. So your first day of lab, the labs will all, since half of the lab is online, we do our worksheets for lab. You can do at home. That's the online part, and videos. There's movies. There's really cool movies that I show in lab of all the animals as we go through the different phyla. Those I'll give you the link on Canvas, and you can watch those at home. So that part, the movies and the worksheets, is done at home. And then we do the dissections and looking at the specimens and the demonstrations in lab, in the in-person lab. And those are really interesting. Those sessions. They are much like a museum every day. We cover a phylum a day, phylum of animals a day, and we look at examples of the specimens and pictures and fossils, and then we do a dissection on an organism within that phyla on that particular day. Okay, I use this. I know it looks like your teacher's teaching you from McDonald's drive-through, right? But it helps the computer to pick up my voice wherever I am in the room here, and if I'm facing that way or something, the computer can pick me up. Okay, and I wear the hat for Yuba College. Go Yuba! But no, I wear the hat to hold this on. All right, welcome to zoology. So this isn't the way I make my PowerPoints. This is the only one in the semester that'll look like this, where it's all writing. Turn this down a little bit so you can see that. Read that if you can read it. This I found amazingly, interestingly. I came across it. I don't know how I came across this in a horoscope. It's not like I read horoscopes ever. I somehow accidentally saw this and I thought, oh, that's strange horoscope, but really profound. We keep million-dollar works of art in well-guarded museums. Paintings created hundreds of years ago are treated with reverence and protected as if they were magical treasures. Our paintings. Meanwhile, beautiful creatures that took nature eons to create don't get nearly the same care. At least 5,000 animal and plant species are going extinct every year. and this is from a while ago. It's probably worse now. In the large part due to human activities, right? Among the recently lost works of art are the, and like I say, this is from years ago. So back then, there was a butterfly, a rhinoceros went extinct, a leopard went extinct. My gosh, a leopard, a toad, and a fish. I'm asking you not to allow a similar discrepancy in your own life. Don't allow that. I urge you to meditate on how crucial it is to nurture your interconnectedness with all of life. Our interconnectedness with all of life, not just the human part. I love the animals. That's why I'm a zoologist. I hope if you don't already love the animals with me, that you will by the end of the semester, because they're fascinating, unique, unbelievable. I learned so much when I took zoology. I couldn't believe it. Okay, here we go. Scientific method. So we need to know this first. The scientific method is a method by which a scientist can obtain information, can learn the truth about life. It's through this protocol, so to speak. This pointer, I don't know if you can see that pointer, I guess so. Here's the steps in the scientific method. Let's say you're a scientist or anybody, and you make an observation of some sort that just you notice something in life. I think I can say you're a I don't know, a scientist taking, or a doctor taking blood pressures all the time, and you notice that every time you take blood pressures on an athlete, or no, not blood pressures, but rather heart rates. I'm sorry, heart rate. So every time you take a heart rate, a resting heart rate on an athlete, you notice that it seems to be lower than the resting heart rate of non-athletic people. Just seems different on the average. Seems like every time I have a strong athlete in here and I take their resting heart rate, it's like lower. It's significantly lower. Observation. So then you question that. Design a question. Is that true? Do athletes have a lower resting heart rate on the average or not? Form a hypothesis as to, you're gonna make an experiment to find out the answer to this. And first you form a hypothesis. That's it, like an educated guess as to how it's going to turn out. So you form a hypothesis and say, for this case would be something like, endurance athletes tend to have lower resting heart rates than the non-athletic population. Okay, that's my hypothesis. Now you design an experiment. You have to control. What you do is you form two groups of people. One group is all the athletes. Randomly pick people, all different ages, different genders. Maybe all males or all females, or the same amount of males and females as your other group. Either way. So you got this athletic group, and then you have another big non-athletic group. They're both the same size of subjects, and they're the both same type of subjects. Either they're all males and males, or females and females, or there's half and half male, female, half and half male, female. And the age, you control all the other variables. Between your two groups, there's no other variable other than the one difference, and that's athletes and non-athletes. All the other variables are the same. So you've controlled all your variables except the one, the experimental variable. Okay. So now you do your experiment, gather your data, analyze it, form a conclusion, whether it's supported or refuted your hypothesis. Now, whether it's supported or refuted your hypothesis. and then you publish that. Now, it's not going to prove anything, but it's going to give some information, some evidence of something. And when lots of evidence from lots of different experiments are gathered, and that evidence supports one another or itself, all those evidences, all those experiments with evidence support one another, then you, over time, you eventually end up with a law or a principle. So we've learned something. Okay, not yet. You don't get a law or principle out of one experiment. Okay, Darwin. Let's find out. Let's go into evolution here. Evolution. The word evolution simply means change, changing over time, evolving, changing. Same thing. So Darwin was, from the 1800s here. You see, was a young man, amazingly. Still, he knew a lot about animals and plants. He was on this ship that was traveling around the world, 5-year voyage, and he was collecting animals and plants, specimens. He was collecting them, and he was, preserving them, analyzing them, and making notes. And so he was learning a lot about the plants and animals of the earth, around the different continents. He started realizing that, hey, a lot of these fossils that I see are somewhat different from the current organisms that I see. So he gets fossils of a turtle or something, not a turtle, a tortoise, and they're a little bit different from the tortoise that's on the island or on the land. Tortoises are on land, turtles are in the water. Tortoise, they're the ones that are in the fossil remains are a little bit different than the ones that are currently alive. But there's both a tortoise, this one and that one, they're both a tortoise, but this it's changed. It's changed over time. It's evolved. He noticed that with a lot of things. A lot of things had changed. They were different from one another, but also different from the fossil evidence. Perpetual change, always changing over time. The world is always changing. Observed by Darwin in the fossil record. Now, a fossil is some kind of remnant of the past. It of course, it could be a bone, but it could be a tool, or just an imprint or a footprint. A footprint is an imprint, like this, or it could be the actual hard components to the animal, or it could be a painting, a human fossil, etc. He of course noticed that none of the soft tissue was preserved in those fossils, just the hard stuff. Sometimes resin preserves soft tissue. Oldest known fossil is not, he didn't discover this, but we know that now. Oldest known fossil is of a bacteria. Now, how do you know the age of these things? Well, the layer of the earth that you find them in gives you the age. If you can figure out the geological age of the layer, the sediment layers in the earth, the lowest layer is the oldest layer, and then materials over time collect on top of that and form another layer, and then materials over time collect on top of that. A storm or something blows all kinds of dirt and material on top and collects and get another layer. So the top layer is the youngest, the newest layer. So if you find your fossil in the bottom layer, it's as old as that geological sediment. Okay, so you can age things by geologically aging the layers. Now, I don't think he could have done that back then, but he could see layers, and he knew that, okay, and in different places he could see sedimentary layers, and he knew that the deepest layer was the oldest. So in this whole topic of evolution, he noticed that there was a whole lot of different species all over the earth. A lot of different birds and a lot of different tortoises and a lot of different this and that's. A lot of different plants, trees. A lot of different species. They had somehow they had multiplied, and the development of different types of organisms over long periods of time through many generations, the multiplication of species. So how do species form? You know, species are the specific different types of organisms, the specifics, species. So how do these species, how have they formed? Well, this was one of his thoughts. I don't know if he called it this, but we call it allopatric speciation, geographical speciation. Primary means, there's another means of speciation, but we won't go into it. You're going to use this one. And so here's what happens. You've got all these organisms. You've got to say you have just say you have a population of common organisms, a common species. And something develops in the environment to divide them up. You know, a mountain range develops, or a glacier comes, or a lake dries up and ends up with 2 ponds instead of 1, or a canyon forms. You get an earthquake and canyon forms. Something like that separates that population of species. Now these guys are over here in this environment, and these guys are over here in this environment. Maybe those environments are a little bit different. You know, this was kind of a treed environment over here, and this was not a treed environment. Who knows? Something was different. Then, over time, these species over here in the treed environment, they evolved and adapted to that tree environment. Their features adapted through generations to the treed environment. And then these over here, their features through generations adapted to non-treed environment. So they evolved differently, and over time they changed. If that happens long enough, they might even change enough that they can't reproduce with one another. So now they're considered 2 different species that came from one common species. Maybe these got all bigger or something, and they can no longer physically mate with the other the other half of the species. And so now they've divided up, and now technically they're 2 different species. These are geese here that have evolved, you know, separated, for, you know, probably flew here and there, and the population here evolved in this environment a little bit different from the population over there, but they're both geese, but they look different. He noticed that kind of thing. Okay. So here's one of the best examples of, he found a lot of these things, a lot of these examples, lots of them. But here's the one that's always in the textbook, the classic example of speciation, multiplication of species. He noticed in the Galapagos Islands, some islands you see here, Galapagos Islands, off of the coast of South America. There's these islands. So say that's South America. There's a kind of a mainland island, and there's some other islands that kind of surround that. It's kind of a unique island pattern. Let's get some light for you. Let's look at this drawing here. So now, finches. He noticed that on this mainland island, there were these finches who were the same as the ones from the mainland. These finches here and these finches here were the same. But then he noticed that on the surrounding islands, the finches, the birds of the same type, were a little bit different. Whoops, were a little bit different here and there and there and there. On the surrounding islands, the finches were all a little bit different. He believed they were all finches, but this one's got a different beak than that one. This one's a different color than that one. He knows those kind of things. Well, these islands, amazingly and interestingly, had differing environments from one another. So when these birds migrated from the mainland to the mainland island and then spread out to the surrounding islands, they ended up in differing habitats, different environments that had different environmental pressures, and so they evolved differently from one another. Here, 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 and here. Really simple design there. Okay, let's see what it says over here now. Adaptive radiation. So look at these birds migrated and then they radiated out, spread out, radiated to spread out. And let's see. Development of ecologically diverse species from a common ancestor here, as they disperse and adapt to different environmental habitats. As they disperse, as they spread out and adapt over generations to different environments. Darwin's finches of the Galapagos Islands. Each island is different in its physical, climatic, and biotic characteristics. Physical, climatic, and biotic characteristics. Thus, each inhabitant, each of these inhabitants evolved differently. Okay? So let's just make it simple. Let's say, okay, this island has lots of nuts to eat, and this island has lots of fruits to eat, and this island has lots of bugs to eat. Over time, the beaks of these birds changed and became adapted to those types of foods. So, in other words, where the nuts were, the birds evolved thicker beaks. You see this beak here, it's strong enough to crack a seed. Whereas in another island, the birds, this guy, he's eating a lot of bugs. He didn't have nuts to eat, so his beak didn't evolve stronger over time. I mean, through the generations, it didn't evolve bigger. It was a nice little tweezer-like beak to glean, pick bugs off of a leaf like that, and then maybe some adapted to eating a fruit. Okay. Well, anyway, he noticed that the beaks were different and the colors of the birds were different. They kind of matched their environment. All right. So he saw this change in the finches. Adaptations, he called them. Adaptations. A body feature that changed. Let's turn this down. We'll go back to our picture, our PowerPoint. So he came up with the theory of natural selection. Theory of natural selection. Nature selecting. This is Darwin's explanation of how evolution occurs. You have to have these, or these are the factors involved with evolution. These are the main factors. So he noticed that organisms had great potential fertility. They had the capability of producing a lot of other of themselves. Even elephants could reproduce if you didn't harm them, or the environment wasn't harming them. They could reproduce and produce a lot of elephants. And of course, the bugs did that, and the birds did that really well, and so forth. Organisms have great potential fertility. Okay. Most organisms are different from one another. So you look around our classroom and you can see people of different features, people with differing features, tall and short and strong and smaller and light and dark and this and that. And so most organisms exhibit genetic variation, genetic differences. Um, I'm at home. I've got two twins, amazingly, 5 years old. One of them's knocking on the door, just a sec. Hey, Pumpkin, can you stay away from door, hon? Okay, go see Mom. Excuse me, you guys. I have twins, boy and a girl, amazingly. Okay, he noticed that he surmised that these variations, the genetic variations, are heritable. They can be passed on from generation to generation. He noticed that, with this potential fertility, organisms of the same species produce a lot of them. They're going to end up competing with one another. They're all alike, so they're all fighting for the same types of food and shelter, competing. So there's competition, a struggle for existence, competitiveness, a struggle for existence. Sometimes a variation, maybe they're taller, maybe that will help them to survive better. And so then when they live longer and reproduce more and pass on their genes more often, and pretty soon the population over time is taller. I know humans are taller. When I go to the high school, I used to be tall. When I was young, I was like almost 6 feet tall. I'm shrunk. Anyway, but when I go to high school now, there's just everybody's taller than me. Even the girls are taller than me. Everybody's evolved taller. Now that's not survival of the fittest, but I think that's improved nutrition, or just plain evolution. Anyway, some variations could help. Some feature variations could help an organism to survive better in a certain habitat, like a giraffe. The giraffes that were taller could eat all the fruits from the tree from the lower area all the way up to the higher area, whereas the short giraffes could only eat the lower area, which was where everybody was eating. They didn't live as well, didn't live as long, didn't pass on their gene as often, and pretty soon the population was tall, had a long neck. Look at these two different frogs there. Adaptation, all development. So here's our factor number 6, continuing from the last page. Adaptation is, I've been using that word, well, here it is. All developmental, behavioral, also anatomical and physical attributes that enhance an organism's ability to use environmental resources to survive and reproduce. Perfect. All developmental, behavioral, anatomical, and physical attributes, features that enhance an organism's ability to use environmental resources, food and shelter, to survive and reproduce. It's an adaptation. Happens over many generations. New adaptations develop, accumulate, animals change, new species. If they change enough that they can't reproduce with one another, they're a new species, and that's how species developed. Excuse me. I thought this was kind of funny. Here we are on all fours there. I'm going to go right here. Standing up, getting more successful, freeing up our arms to do all kinds of things, food and tools and this and that, and here we go, and here we are nowadays. Back down there on the computer. We're even a step farther now, huh? We're a step beyond this picture. What's next? We are we're adapting to cell phone. So how do we do that? Now we're all going to have, someday humans are going to have this really good method of texting, texting hands. Let's be our adaptation there. Anyway. So we've got all these new species forming through this method of natural selection and evolution. So how many do we have? Well, there's a lot known, 1.25 million, probably more now. This is old, so probably double that now. But they think there's way more than that. We just haven't named them all yet. I have a friend, biologist, who has a insect named after himself. Discovered it was different from all the others, named it after himself. Beetles are pretty diverse, huh? Order Coleoptera. Incredible diversity in the plant and animal kingdoms. Just incredible. We've got unicellular protozoans, tiny things, microscopic, up to these giant blue whales they are the biggest animals that ever lived. They're bigger than the dinosaurs, the blue whales. They did find a gigantosaurus that was pretty close to the size of the blue whale. So there are lots of species. So how do we define a species? So I've been talking about species. I haven't told you what it is. There's different ways to define species. We'll use this one. Okay? All members of the same species are capable of mating with one another and producing fertile offspring. Fertile. Like a mule is not species. It's not a true species because a mule, right, is formed from a donkey and a horse, donkey, horse, mule. But a mule and a mule can't reproduce with one another and produce another mule. You have to have a donkey and a horse. So they're not considered a species. All members of the same species are reproductively isolated from other species. They can reproduce with one another, but not any other type of organism. Here's a bunch of different species here. I just put that up for the fun of it. And then here's Darwin proposed all of the tree branching development of all the species. The branches that were closer those organisms are more closely related in time. The branches that are farther apart, those species are more remotely related. The tree pattern branching of speciation, development of species. He proposed that. Okay. So architectural pattern of an organism. All right. So we've got that natural selection forming all these, or we have evolution forming all these. So we have evolution by natural selection forming all these different species, speciation, over time, long periods of time. The Earth is so old. We are just not even a speck of time. Our lifetime is not even a speck in time. All right, let's see the complexity of these organisms. Well, there's a lot of them that are just plain one cell. The whole organism is one measly cell, unicellular, like a unicycle. Simplest single-celled organisms. all life functions are organized within a single cell. Includes the protozoans, like that one. What is, amoeba, paramecia, euglena, those guys you probably saw in high school biology. What is this one? See the cilia there? Nucleus. Um, that looks like it's looks like those are chloroplasts. So that must be euglena. I don't know. I don't think euglena has cilia. So I'm not sure what this one's. I was going to say a paramecium, but I just noticed the green chloroplasts in there. So it's not either of these. It's something in between. Nevertheless, it's a protozoan. So single cell, unicellular organisms. Then there's organisms that are a little more complex. They're multicellular, but they're not quite as advanced as some of the other ones, as some of the other multicellular organisms. So your author calls them simple multicellular organisms. These, like the sponges and the volvox, are cool. Maybe you saw those in high school biology. That's a protozoan. So these organisms are groupings, an aggregation of cells. The cells are somewhat different from one another. And there's maybe some division of labor. These cells kind of do this, and those cells kind of do that. A division of labor among the cells is evident. Good examples given is e.g. volvox, that's these guys, sponges, that are considered colonial animals. So it's a colony of cells. These are little reproductive. In here, these are cells that are undergoing reproduction and creating a new volvox, and it will leave this. So this is one volvox, and this will leave that and grow up to become another colony, an adult volvox. You can see in all the different species of volvox, you can see this advancement from super simple multicellular volvox to more advanced multicellular volvox. You can see a progression of advancement in volvox even. Then we have, your author calls them the complex multicellular organisms like us. Okay, so now what you have now is not just an aggregation of cells, but you've got a giant aggregation of cells in which there are groupings of cells that are similar, and they do a common function for the whole organism. And we call those groupings of cells tissues. So we're going to go up through the different levels of organization in a complex multicellular organism. Different levels of organization in a complex multicellular organism. The example here is the cnidarian. This is a hydra. It's in the same group as a jellyfish. they have a nerve net within them. It's they're neurons that are connected in a pattern like that. They're all functioning together. They're all similar, and they're all functioning together to do a nervous function. First, nervous tissue, common function, coordination of the organism. It's tentacles to feed and move. Amazingly, we have a similar nerve net located in our intestines. You can actually take the intestines out of, say, a rat, and they will undergo peristaltic contractions outside of the body, detached from a nervous system, a brain, spinal cord, detached from that. And they can do, if you give them warm water and electrolytes, the intestines will continue to do peristalsis for a while on their own. It's a nerve net, independent nerve net. Then, if you group tissues together, now you have different tissues grouped together for a common function of some sort in the body. You have an organ. You have an organ. Tissues grouped and working together for a common specialized function. That's kind of the definition of an organ. Here's some organs. Here's eyeballs are an organ. They're a group of tissues. Look at that eyeball. Cool. Lungs, heart, liver, kidney, tongue, blood vessels, all considered organs because they're groupings of tissues. Think of all the different organs you can think of. Then if and when organs are grouped for one big common function, they're all working together for a common function, say like digestion, then you have a system, an organ system. Here's a digestive system. It's a group of organs working together for a common function, digestion and assimilation, absorption. Organs grouped and working together for a common specialized function. 11 systems in a human. Digestive, can you name them 11? Digestive, respiratory, nervous, cardiovascular, heart, blood vessels, reproductive, urinary, kidneys, integumentary, what's that? Skin, skeletal, muscular, lymphatic, kind of your immune system, endocrine, what's that? Glands and hormones. Okay, so now we have all these different organisms. How do we classify them? Well, the science that does that is taxonomy. A taxon, or a taxa is plural, taxon is one. Taxa are major groupings of organisms at a particular level in a classification system. So we're going to use the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species hierarchy, levels of classification, with species being the organisms that are most related to one another. So remember that. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Okay? Taxonomy has a binomial nomenclature, two-name nomenclature, two-name naming. Species are identified by a specific binomial name, two names, genus and species, like your first name and your second name. Your first name isn't as specific as your second name is. We are Homo sapiens. Each binomial name is unique to one species. Each species has one binomial name. So they might have the same first name. Two cats may have the same first name, feline, but they will have a specific second name, like first name Professor, second name Stolberg, more specific. Okay, no two species can share a binomial name. This helps to name things better than just common names. You know, here's, for example, here's two bears, and they're just not related. Got a koala bear and a brown bear. See those when you go to Yosemite. Oh, when I was a kid, there were so many brown bears in Yosemite. They were all over the place. Now there's a million people there. Anyway, so that's a little more precise than the common names. Phylogenies, groupings, methods of taxonomy constructs groupings, named groups, and they use features to group things. Physical and behavioral features they use to say, oh, these guys are more related to one another, and these guys are related to one another, and these aren't related to them, and this and that. Homologous structures are these types of structures. They are this. They are similar structures, sometimes used for different functions with the same evolutionary origin. So here's some appendages. An arm, a forelimb, a wing, a fin, and another forelimb. That when you look at the bones, you see a common pattern. So it kind of indicates, it suggests that, maybe these all came from a common organism long ago that had an appendage that evolved differently. You know, this group, in this environment, it evolved into an arm, and in this group and in this environment, it evolved into a forelimb, and in this group and in this environment, it evolved as a wing. You see, and in this group and this environment, it evolved as a fin. Homologous, they're homologous to one another. They are features that came from a common ancestral appendage that have evolved differently and are now being used for differing purposes. Okay, vertebrate limbs, arms, wings, legs, fins, all diverged, evolved from a common ancestral appendage. Divergent evolution. So they were once in an organism that was all the same appendage, and over time they changed to differing features, differing appendages. That's divergent evolution. Whereas organisms can come from two differing backgrounds and evolve to a common pattern, convergent evolution. So structures that have done that are considered analogous structures. Similar structures often used for a common function, but with different evolutionary origins. Like this, we've got, that's a fruit bat. That's got a wing and a dinosaur, pterodactyl, and a bird, and an insect, a bee. All have wings, but from different origins, and they evolved into a wing for flying purposes. Different types of wings for a common purpose. Analogous structures can confuse your phylogeny because they look alike and can falsely indicate relatedness. That makes sense. Sometimes you have to sort through that. You know, a bat is a mammal, while a bird is a bird, and a pterodactyl is a reptile, and a bee is an arthropod, an insect. Right. Okay, what have we got next here? We're still constructing our phylogenies, our groupings. So here we can lump the phyla into various groups based upon major evolutionary features such as these. Symmetry. Right. Let's see what's next. Okay, let's do this slide and then we will shut down this particular video. Okay, and we'll finish it in the next video. Symmetry. Let's see, we can lump the phyla, the groupings of animals, into various groups based upon major evolutionary features, such as these. Okay, so in other words, what kind of symmetry does the organism have? Symmetry as, you know, the radial symmetry are those organisms that are around the symmetry, like this, where you can divide them in lots of different, that's radial. That's a radial symmetrical pattern. Or do they have bilateral, two to the side symmetries, bi, two laterals to the side, like, you know, human. And I'm going to draw a gingerbread. I'm not an artist, obviously. There you go, bilateral symmetry. So there's a question, do they have radial symmetry or some other symmetry or no symmetry? Or are they bilateral symmetry? Levels of embryonic organization. Well, we're going to talk about these after this specifically. So how do the embryos, what are the tissues in the embryos like? Are they, that's real, that shows relatedness or not, how the embryos are. Do they have germ layers or layers that things germinate from? Do they have a common 2 sets of germ layers or 3 sets of germ layers, or what do they have? We'll talk about this specifically. Developmental characteristics, are they a protostome or a deuterostome? I'll explain that. How does the cavity within inside them develop? Where their organs are, how does it develop? They found that the cavities develop in different ways. Are they divided, you know, segmented, you know, like a lobster, like its tail, or a worm, or not? And do they have a head or not? Cephalization. So they can use these, and there's way more, but these are the main ones for us. You can use these features, analyze these features, and see relatedness or non-relatedness in organisms. Okay, so let's go through these, starting with our next video. Thanks for joining zoology. It's going to be a fun semester. To me, it was just of all the classes I ever took, it was the most interesting class I took. I hope it's the same for you. Okay.